Well, welcome to a new Harry's Farm video. And in this video, we're not going to be looking at the farm and what's happening at the moment in the fields. I think it's high time I did an update on the solar installation that we did in September 2022 and just discuss our experience with heat pumps. Our house we built in 2007 with a heat pump system dedicated for the heating for the house, and also we got another heat pump which I'll get to in a moment on the farm as well. And back then in 2007 we also installed a wind turbine because I was keen to banish oil from running the house. At that time I thought oil prices might go up. The heating costs for the size of house we were, well, they were excessive. The prediction was around £14,000 a year, and we're thinking 2007, and I thought, God, that's only going to go up. Maybe there's another way of doing it. I looked at heat pumps, and it's pure, the house is run purely on electricity with no gas or oil. So I'm going to go into that in a moment. But first, starting with the solar installation. And the first thing that you have to consider, if you're considering putting solar in, you have to get permission from your current provider. So whoever supplies your house, not the ones you're doing the bill with, this is from the supplier who's responsible for the grid. You have to ask permission and they will advise you of what size installation you can have. Now, because this is a farm and it has multiple three-phase connections, we were allowed to put a bigger installation in than perhaps you would be able to in a normal domestic situation. I was given up to 30 kilowatts of solar panel to put in, and we maxed it out. Now, for the house, we did 12 kilowatts, as you can see here, and I'll go into detail there. Up at the farm is 18 kilowatt system that feeds various buildings, grain sheds, cottage, up there. But I'm going to concentrate just on this one really. This is the domestic one. I think it's more relevant to the audience who might be interested in this. So this was installed, and I did on the ground installation, as you can see here. This is a hidden corner in the garden, and I didn't want it on the house or the garage because we're in a Cotswold area, lovely stone buildings, beautiful stone roofs, and if you've had to install traditional stone roof on your property, the last thing I want to see is solar panels plastered all over it, and we had this hidden corner. So we went for a ground installation, and it works okay, this. I quite like it because it means you can keep the solar panels clean all the time. But the thing you have to, first thing I learnt was they are very susceptible to shading. And we've got a hedge here, and hedges grow. And so we had to, as soon as the hedge grows, suddenly I've got a slightly different output from here. And I thought, that's odd. Rang the installers, Home Eco put this in. And they say, yeah, if you get shading with your insulation, if this panel gets shade on it and that one hasn't, the system says, hang on a minute, there's something gone wrong with the panel, it might have broken, and it sort of shuts down panels because there's it's a different output from that panel to that panel. So first thing you do is you've got to consider shading, which is fairly obvious, but if you've got a roof insulation and you might have a chimney or something like that, that'll make a difference if that at times of day the chimney will actually cover some of the solar panel in shade. Now, 12 kilowatt system. The big eye-opener, I think, with solar, having had it for 2 years, is how useless it is in the winter months. If I have an app and I track it, and I'll go into numbers in a moment, but if I look at house solar monthly, peak output is June. There's more day length in June. It's the highest day length month, and then it starts to go down. And then in December it goes down. And December is the least output from this solar system. But the numbers, the drop from peak summer to December, I wasn't expecting. And if I look at the numbers, December just gone, 2024, for 31 days, total output of this 12 kilowatt system was 119 kilowatt hours was put out by this system. If I look at June 2024, 1,715 units were put out by this system. Same panel, same size, but it puts out 14 times more power in a day in June than it does in December. So first thing you've got to consider, if you're going to put solar in, you need a way of using that electricity you're going to generate in the summer months. And if you're thinking you're going to heat your house via solar in the middle of the winter, think again. Now let's just talk about output. So 12 kilowatt system from these, 410 or 20 watts per panel. So in total, with the perfect sun, midday, shining down this, not a cloud in the sky, you should be getting 12,000 watts output. And every now and then you do. In June, everything has to be perfect. Even a slight haze will drop output to 10,000 watts or something like that. It takes nothing to drop the output. You need the bright colour. And on a day like this, we have just checked the output of these panels, and it's February and it's cloudy and it's misty, and our eyes just say, oh, it's just a normal winter day. The output I've just checked is around 100 watts from a 12,000 watt system. So be fully aware, how do you use your electricity? Do you need all this excess electricity coming from the solar panels in June, July, August time? And it doesn't work if you're trying to heat your house and you have the heat pump. So that was a bit of a surprise. Fortunately, we're in an unusual situation, I suppose, in that we do have a way of using electricity through the summer months because we have a heat pump heating an outside swimming pool. And anyone who has a swimming pool will realise that gobbles up energy to keep it at a temperature. So what I've had to do is balance the power this is generating to how I use the electricity, and there's timers everywhere because fairly obviously the electricity you do produce by solar only comes in daylight hours. Yeah, it's not a surprise, that one, but it's that summer usage. And actually, if I looked at my consumption of electricity before these went in, our peak consumption was actually during the summer months because of the swimming pool. So that is why I did solar. Now you'll see the turbine in the background doing absolutely nothing. That we put in 2006. Solar wasn't really on the scene in the way it is now back then, but there were these wind turbines you could get. This is a 6 kilowatt turbine, and if I look back historically at the years when we've had it, he put out an average of about 5,000 units of electricity a year. And today's price for electricity is 23 pence thereabouts. That's £1,150 a year of electricity it produced. That, back in 2006, if I look at the builds for the insulation, you have to put a lot of concrete base on it, its construction, was about £22,000 in 2006. This solar installation, 12 kilowatts, was around £14,000. And in 2024, these panels produced a total of 10,417 units of electricity, or kilowatt hours. And that was worth, at 23 pence a unit, £2,395. So you get more bang for your buck on solar than you do on a turbine. The positive of the turbine is it tends to produce most of its electricity during the winter months when we have sort of October storms coming off, these named storms. That goes nuts and you get quite a lot of electricity out of it. That can get up to 100 kilowatt hours a day in a proper storm, while the solar peak, if I look at the peak day, I think it's about 82 kilowatt hours from this system in a day. Average in June is 60 kilowatt hours a day, and average during December is about 3.5 kilowatt hours a day. 3.5. You're not going to charge your car for that. You're not going to use the heat pump is going to consume way more than that. So yeah, solar's been a bit of an eye-opener in how useless it is during the winter months and how you have to adapt everything to producing power during the day and how you manage that. So that's the solar. And I think it would just be useful now to go on to the heat pump and how we do the heat pump in the house, because we've got a ground source heat pump, while the pool uses an air to water heat pump, and they work in different ways. The ground source, I'm going to explain the ground source in a moment, but the air to water, that is basically a big fan sucking lots of air through a condenser heat pump, and it's taking the temperature out of the air. And my experience with these air heat pumps is they work way better on warm days than chilly days, and the efficiency goes right down, in the one I use anyway, when the low temperatures. So at 9-10 degrees it's really working very hard to put temperature into the water, but when you're at 20 plus degrees on a sunny lovely day, it's chucking heat into the pool. It's just more efficient. I understand today these air to water heat pumps are much better. Let's go to the field. Ground source heat pump, how does it work? Well, basically I'm walking on where the heat comes for our house. Under here there are basically 4 trenches we dug here, about 50 metres long. You can see a slight indent here. I'm standing on one just here, and there's a 3 down that way. And these trenches contain these sort of slinky pipes. They're about 6 foot underground in sand, and the system pumps water around these slinky pipes here, and it's an awful lot of them, and uses that it's basically been that the temperature of the water is obviously at ground temperature, and during the summer the ground might heat up to 11-12 degrees Celsius, and it just collates. The water then goes to the heat pump, which is like a fridge, a reverse of a fridge, because you want the heat rather than the cold, goes through a heat pump, and it cools the water. It takes the energy out of the water that's come into the house at ground temperature. So think of it at 10 degrees, the heat pump gets hold of it, and it's a huge volume of water. It takes 2 or 3 degrees out of the water temperature from coming from the field, and uses that heat to warm up water in a separate system up to about 40 degrees, a much smaller volume of water, and that is then goes around the house in underfloor piping, and that is how you heat the house. The water that came in from the field at 10 degrees after going through the heat pump goes back to the field at 7-8 degrees, and then warms up again to ground temperature of say 10 degrees and goes back, and that's the cycle. So you're dragging heat out of the ground in your field here, and just taking 2 degrees out of that to heat up a much smaller volume of water to 40 degrees that's going around your house constantly. And it's a cycle that goes on all the time. The thing about a heat pump doing the house, it's basically on for a lot longer than your gas boiler is on, that does a power heats your house up for when you get home and then just quietly ticks in the background. It's a more instant heat than the heat you get from a heat pump. And if I just looked now, and the water coming in, because we're at the middle of February, is much cooler at this time of year. It's because the ground it's sucked all that heat out of the ground, and it's coming into the house at about 4 degrees and coming back out the heat pump to the field at about 1 degree, rising to 3-4 degrees, going back to the heat pump, etc. So we've sort of chilled the ground, but the ground is naturally chilled. Everybody thinks it's like, oh, it's from underground heat you're using. You're not. You're actually using the heat of the sun that just warms the ground up. So during the summer, soil temperature goes up. It's why crops get going in the spring as soil temperature comes up. So you're harnessing this sort of waste heat, and why it's so efficient, because 1 kilowatt of electricity going into the heat pump is dragging this free heat, if you like, out of the water. And 1 kilowatt of electricity in the heat pump will produce around 3 or 4 kilowatts worth of heat on the water that's going around your house. it's this bizarre equation. So I was looking at the heat pump is actually 28 kilowatt output, so it's consuming around 11-12 kilowatts at peak performance. So the solar panels are matched if they were putting out their, their ultimate thing. But the thing is, we don't use the heat pump during the summer. The swimming pool does that. That's a smaller heat pump, and that is an air source heat pump, and they're the ones that people are mostly using to put in the house, because the trouble with a ground source heat pump like this, it's incredibly disruptive. There's big diggers, huge area. We're all right because we've got a field next to the house, so it's not so bad putting this system in. The alternative is to put boreholes down, but I was told by Earth Energy when we first did this in 2006, then the dilemma there is your efficiency is all down to how big an area you're using to suck the ground temperature to the heat pump. So the bigger area, the more pipes you can put in, the more efficient it is. And if you put a borehole down, it doesn't give you that big exposure without putting several boreholes down, and then it gets really expensive. Doing it this way, we've got a digger on the farm, we put an excessive number of pipes in, and that has made it very efficient, and I'm very pleased with it really. We've had it in, it's 2006 it was installed, we moved in 2007, so it's 18, 19 years old. We've had 3 services on the pump since we moved in. Now I ought to go into the size of the house as well. That it's designed to heat 475 square meters of floor space. I should mention now that that's not all house. We have garages down here, and because I work on my cars and I'm a bit of a car nut, as you might know from Harry's Garage, I have underfloor heating in all the garages, and it just makes working on cars in the winter just heaven. I can set it any temperature, and there's a gym above the garage as well that's got a little bit of heating. So it's quite a big floor area it deals with. I worked out that's 4 times the size of the average property in the UK, and the average boiler in the UK apparently has a gas output of about 24 kilowatts equivalent. This, as I say, the heat pump is 28 kilowatts, and yet it's heating 4 times the air of an average boiler. How are we doing that? How are we getting away with such a low energy usage? Well, that's because we built the house in 2007 and went berserk on insulating everything. So double insulation in the walls, triple in the roof, all sorts of things, all sorts of sheets to hold that heat in there. And I just love the way the house is heated with the heat pump, because it's all underfloor heating. We've got old flagstones that had to be cut down. You basically have stone floors are your best, or tiled floor, because you get the best radiant from your heat. So you have no radiators in the house, but there's this ambient warmth from the floor, that the water's going around the system is about 30 degrees, the floor might be at 20 degrees, 21 degrees, and it just gives this even heat throughout the house. We also have an electric auger that everybody will tell you is the most inefficient thing going. Well, I can turn that off in the summer, and I know it consumes around 15-16 kilowatt hours a day. That's not bad, because we do all the cooking on it, everything, but it also delays when we put the heat pump on, because there's this residual sort of heat in the house. When you get to those months, October, November, when you're tempted to turn the heating on, if you have an electric auger, it's just quietly there, and I think it saves money. So I do not think that anywhere near as inefficient that everyone will tell you on, if you put a Google in and say, oh, we've got to rip the auger out because it costs so much money. It's a different story of oil. They're very old tech, the old ones. Ours is electric, 7 kilowatts, very controllable, and it snoozes at night and all sorts of things. So you can manage it, and yeah, I've measured it and I wouldn't be without it. Right, now, numbers. How much does it cost to run with the solar? Now we put the solar in, etc. Well, I'm going to first look at the units we use a year. So the house, everything, swimming pool, heated garage, auger, etc. In 22,275 units of electricity. That is £5,353 at today's price of 23 pence a kilowatt hour, so £446 a month. You can argue that's a lot of electricity, but then it is 4 times the size of your average house. There is a swimming pool there, there are heated garages, so it's not that bad, and that is only one bill. There is no gas, no oil, no nothing, so that is the cost. And also, I should add, in the last year we are charging the cars from it as well. So out of that 22,000 there is also charging the cars, and we've got a plug-in hybrid at the moment, and we are doing around 70% of our motoring on electric. I think in 2020 we got it down to 39,000 a year, and then the next year 22,000 units. So it has solar. We're not exporting hardly any. You can get, I think, 15 pence a unit if you do with Octopus, but I'm looking to use every single unit and make it as efficient as I can. And if we've got a little bit of excess, well, I might put the temperature of the pool up a bit and then turn it down again on the cloudy days, and you balance it out like that. So playing around with things, I hope that gives you a better insight to how the solar works, and how you must be aware that you've got to find a way of using that electricity during the summer. I should also mention you can get a Powerwall, you can install a battery, but there's an awful lot of months when you're hardly producing, any electricity at all. If you're only doing 3 or 4 units a day, what's the point having a battery there? There's no electricity being produced to store, and a normal domestic system, we're about double the size of it, so it's even less. So, and you get a day like this, we'll probably do 1.5 units out of a system that can do 80 plus in the winter. The other thing, just while I'm on this and being a farm video, I look at these giant solar farm installations. I think, do you realise that in those 4 months, those winter months, the area you actually need to produce the amount of electricity you are in June is 14 times the area? You could shrink it. And I think we should look at how we do solar farms and combine it with turbine, because it's all about the connection to the grid. It would make much more sense to me that the solar area shrunk right down, but it also had some turbines within it, so you may maximise the connection and it was more balanced, its output, rather than plastering it all over the land. But anyway, that's just a minor thing. Next time we're on Harry's farm, we'll go back, we'll be looking around the farm and just seeing what's happening there. But there's my download on living with solar heat pumps here in the UK. Hope you found it useful. If you did, well, keep watching, keep subscribing, more videos coming along very soon.